Good afternoon and welcome to the Knowledge SIG webinar. I'm Martin Fisher, I'm from the APM Knowledge SIG. I'm joined today by my SIG committee colleague Claire Nicholas Walker, and we're really pleased today to welcome Virginia Henry, and the subject of her presentation and talk and discussion we're going to have is making the most of knowledge with expert communities.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin, and thanks everybody for joining on this beautiful afternoon. A long time ago I was a journalist, and after making lots of programs and writing lots of news stories, I started to train other journalists at the BBC, and some of the courses were sort of a week or 2 weeks long, and there was always a section which was really important on libel and slander and contempt of court and the meanings of those things and why they were so important. And I started to realise that we were going over the same ground with the BBC lawyers every time we ran these courses. So I started to think, wouldn't it be good if people could do some pre-course work, you know, get their heads around the difference between malicious falsehood and libel and stuff. So I started to want an intranet where people could go to it and pick stuff up as they needed it. But that was a sort of revolutionary idea at the BBC at the time. It's still a long time ago. So I wanted then to look outside and see what was going on out in the real world. So that led me to leave the BBC, join a .com startup and start to understand a bit more about the online world and how things were published and how people interacted. And that eventually led me into knowledge management, working with a lot of intranets and a lot of exchange of knowledge. If any of you are knowledge managers, this will be a really familiar pyramid to you. It's a common visualization used in knowledge management, and it majors on the transformation of data from raw stuff to be processed through to experience and knowledge to be shared. But I find that each of the building blocks of the pyramid is missing a vital cornerstone, because what it's not taking into account is that from the data being generated and captured by people to the practical application of knowledge by people, the whole structure is built on people. People from all backgrounds and all disciplines. And I, myself, in my professional life, have relied very heavily, and still do, on the knowledge of people, others who've done what I haven't done and learnt things I haven't learnt. And that helps me both personally and professionally. Here's the first poll for you. So how much do you all love networking events?
51% so far saying they're okay, but not my ideal night out. Close second is if I know others who will be there. 12% said they'll avoid them, and 10% said they can't get enough of them.
Hey, 10%, that is seriously impressive. Well, all praise to you guys who can't get enough of them. I think maybe some of you are being ironic, but hey, some of you might just be the most gregarious people I've ever encountered. I think that the answers pertaining to you'll go if you know others will be there, and they're okay, but hey, I've probably got better things to do, are much more common with the people I've encountered. I know when I was transitioning out of broadcast journalism into the world of online and into the world of knowledge management that I found it quite challenging to having been able to tap into a network of fellow professionals, fellow journalists, to now moving into an area that I didn't know with people that I didn't, you know, have much in common with yet. I found that quite a challenge. I knew I had to network. I knew I had to join communities and groups for my own benefit and to learn. But it was quite daunting. You know, I didn't know anyone who'd be there, and a lot of the people I've spoken to find it quite a sort of a daunting thing to do. But all praise to those of you who can't get enough of them. I'm really thrilled by that. Like came about, the London Information and Knowledge Exchange, over a glass of wine after an event which was put on by the City Information Group. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's no longer in existence, but It was a group of mostly information researchers and librarians in the city who used to get together. It was a brilliant group. And at the end of one evening, a few of us were drinking a glass of wine together and bemoaning the fact that there were no regular meetups for knowledge and information professionals. There were some sort of professional associations, there were some groups that occasionally met, but there was nothing regular that the broad sweep of us engaged in knowledge and information could go to. And we sort of thought there should be. And we wondered how many other people thought the same. And if they did, what would make them want to come along? So here's your next question. What would persuade you to join a new network? Learn something new, meet people with shared professional interests, if it was informal, if there was a drink and good food on offer.
I think we're in a clear lead. 57% would come to learn something new. 36% to meet people with shared professional interests. And third is if there was a drink and good food, and only 2% think they'd come if it was informal.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think I'm on the side of the people who are interested in the drink and good food, but yeah, it's really interesting that so few were interested in the informality of an event. Thank you all for doing that, because that's really helpful, because these were the sorts of questions that were coming up as we drank our second glass of wine, and we decided that all of them were important to us. We wanted to learn about what we didn't know. We wanted to learn something new when we went to an event, otherwise we could have stayed in and watched telly. We didn't want just to meet people with the same job title as ours, but we did want to meet people with shared professional interests, and we thought that was quite important because there are a lot of different job titles in knowledge and information, and you could exclude people by not thinking it more broadly. We wanted it to be relaxed and informal because of that thing I was talking about earlier of being daunted by entering a room full of people you didn't know, and that sort of cliquey feeling where you're not in with the in crowd. So we wanted it to be kind of relaxed and have an informal vibe. And we wanted a drink and good food on offer, not just because, you know, I really like a drink, but because we didn't want people to spend just a very short time with us and then rush off because they had to get a train, they were starving or whatever. So all of these things were really important to us, and they informed our founding principles. As you can see, looking at these, we thought through the consistency of the events, that we didn't want committees, we didn't want, you know, a big administrative structure because none of us were into that. We wanted it to be free and open for absolutely everybody. And we wanted the flexibility to have different sorts of meetups and different sorts of events. And we were doing it on a shoestring, we decided, so we'd use Web2 tools to promote the events and to establish the group. Ambitious, but cheerful and cheap is how we sort of defined it. So we found a pub in Bloomsbury that would let us use their upstairs room for free. It had the suitable name of the Perseverance because we thought we would probably have to persevere with this to persuade the group to take off. And we set up a LinkedIn group and publicised the first meeting there. And we used Twitter. We've got a Twitter account, and we put together a really basic website. That's how we promoted what we were doing. And of course, we told people we knew. And we were really thrilled when more than a dozen people turned up for the first event. And that was back in 2009. And we asked everybody who came that first night what they wanted, whether they thought we were on roughly the right track, and they said pretty much yeah, even though none of us had the same job title in the room, and none of us were doing exactly the same kind of thing. We felt we all had enough in common to learn a lot from these kind of things. So that was back then. Since then, we've held a lot of events. By the end of the year, we're going to be up to about 70. And the wide variety reflects the broad range of our members' interests. And in fact, most of the sessions you see here in front of you, from storytelling and introduction to coaching and open data and stuff, most of them are led by members, because we've discovered that there's such a wealth of wisdom in like that we can draw on that, and that the people who want to share stuff with us are a big draw because they just know so much. So it's been a really interesting, exciting journey where everybody, I think, has learnt quite a lot. Some of the events aren't to everybody's tastes, but mostly people find something in them that really suits them. And the variety of members has definitely fulfilled that ambition, that we should make it open to everybody. We've got in our membership professors and lawyers, entrepreneurs, archivists, recruitment consultants and project managers, data analysts and webmasters, knowledge managers and librarians, expert witnesses. We've even got someone with the job title of creativiter, and I don't really get what a creativiter is, but maybe one of you guys know. And the membership is growing by the week, which is brilliant. So how we've done it, with a lot of enthusiasm, we're all really eager to learn, and we know that there's so much going on in our different fields and across the world of knowledge and information that we can't keep up with it all, so we rely heavily on learning from each other. The venue is usually above a pub, so that's quite useful to us. It means people can come and get themselves a drink and relax and not feel as if they're entering that room full of strangers, even when they are. In the first 6 months, the membership grew from that first dozen to 160. And now there's more than 1,300 people from mostly the UK, but strangely people across the world have joined. We had, for some time, we had a MIC, Manchester Information and Knowledge Exchange, and somebody was talking about putting a bike together in Barcelona, I think. But so the idea of like has caught on with lots of people. To organize these things, you need some people who are there to help. So we rarely have fewer than 4 helping one another out. The most important thing, I think, for me is that it's really enjoyable, because if it's a chore, it's a bore. So we have a really good time putting these events together, and we make sure that we have fun. So here's the last poll question for you guys. Which single factor do you think is most important in building and sustaining a successful network? Ideas, the venue, the members, regular events, or inclusivity?
It looks like great idea is slightly in the lead, followed very closely by inclusivity. Membership and regular events follow closely, they're a tie. And great venue doesn't seem to factor very much, only 2%. That's
really interesting. And it's reassuring because some of the pubs we meet above, I don't think you could really describe them as great venues, but it's interesting that inclusivity comes up quite high in people's thoughts. Thank you all for taking part. Because to me that's the single most important factor. You could have great ideas. Actually, ideas aren't hard, are they? Well, I don't think they are. I think you just talk to a bunch of people and you'll get a lot of great ideas. Some of the members are gregarious, but some of them really aren't at all. They're not into exhibitionism or hanging out with bunches of people, and that doesn't necessarily matter. The regularity of events is fairly important. People need to know that they can put stuff into their diaries. But everybody has to be equally valued and equally welcome, because it's just about the people, really. So even if it's not been a brilliant event in people's minds, you know, they haven't necessarily learnt too much that's new, or it's covered ground that they were familiar with anyway, they can still have a useful evening by the networking element. So they own the event, and they own like just as much as anybody else does. So thanks. Thank you all very much indeed for taking part in those polls. It's been really quite illuminating and in some ways reassuring. Back to that question that we were talking about a few slides back. An example of when you've drawn on the expertise of a network or community member to benefit a project or program. Remember, it could have been a chance remark or the thoughts of an unlikely source of knowledge, but maybe there are examples where you've had a serendipitous encounter which has really helped you. And we'll see what people have to say. And of course, any other questions that you might have, please just ask.
Excellent. Thanks, Virginia. There are some really interesting answers there. I thought on the one about the factors that are most important, quite reassuring in a way that the venue isn't considered to be that important. It's more about the people, I suppose. And interesting that they're all fairly evenly spread, aren't they? The other four sort of criteria: ideas, gregarious, members, regularity, and inclusivity. So I think it shows you kind of, you know, in keeping all of those plates spinning, if you like, you're covering the right bases. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about joining like?
It's really easy, and we'd love it if you did. You just find us on LinkedIn, or type like news into a browser, and up our website will come, and you'll see what we've got coming up. The next event in September, we're doing some speed dating, but actually it's brain dating. So we're following a sort of speed dating format, but we're matching our brains and having sort of speed learning sessions. And the event after that in October is all about turbocharging your career. So looking at your personal branding online and offline. So join on LinkedIn, and you'll get notifications of when the events are coming up, and it's very straightforward. You just sign up on Eventbrite and come along.
Great. Okay, thanks. I'm sure a number of people will be interested in turbocharging their career. That's a very provocative title. I'll turn now to some of the questions that the participants have been putting in. Brendan has asked, hello Brendan, do you provide a breakdown of member interests and contact details before an event?
That's a really good question, Brendan. We ran a couple of conferences. We haven't done one recently. We didn't do one last year. They're quite intensive things to get together, but we did before our conferences. But we don't before the events. You can see on, you know, when you sign up on Eventbrite, you can see who's coming. And we kind of, maybe we should, but we kind of leave it to members to exchange contact details on the night, or to message each other via LinkedIn, because we haven't really got a massively good justification for that, just that nobody has taken on that administrative role.
Arjandeep has asked, what's the structure of the organisation? How is it run? Fairly informal.
Yeah, Arjun, it's kind of, yeah, structure is a really good word for what we don't have. So it was founded by me, another knowledge manager, a librarian, and a businesswoman who puts together design sites, intranets, information site. And we didn't really want a formal set up. So the City Information Group that I mentioned earlier, they were a charity, a registered charity, and they had, you know, a committee and a board and that sort of thing. And I know a lot of other organisations have that. We didn't want that. We wanted it to be more fluid, and we wanted the members to take as much part as possible in coming up with ideas for what we did and how we did it, suggesting tours around their own sites and stuff. And we thought that if we had any kind of formal structure, it might get in the way of how we evolved. And also, because there's no membership fee, you really only pay for your food and drink on the night. We didn't think that it would be much of a problem not having a terribly formal structure. So there are a sort of consistent group of about 4 of us who make sure stuff happens, and then other members come in and out depending on their availability to suggest events, run events, come up with ideas, and do some of the legwork.
I've got one from Phil Rose. At the events, what form of events are most successful? Presentations, interactive, gameplay, etc.?
That's a really good question. Sometimes people really love to sit and listen to a speaker. I don't know why I do this, but I try to discourage too much PowerPoint. I prefer people to talk about stuff and maybe pass some stuff around rather than us all gawping at a screen. I don't know, I just feel we do too much of that in our day jobs without having to spend an evening doing it. So there aren't that many talk and PowerPoint presentations, but there are some really engaging speakers that we have who just know an enormous amount about their subject. The most popular events are those where you learn from an oracle, and the interactive events where all of the members are involved in doing stuff and sharing their knowledge. So we had one recently about evidence-based decision-making, where we all had to get into groups and try to make some evidence-based decisions, which was, apart from being hilarious, because so many of us discovered how entirely prejudiced we were, and we weren't really going on evidence at all, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. We learn an enormous amount from doing the exercises, from going through the processes. And I think those are really popular with people because it's easy to watch presentations. It's more, stuff stays with you more if you get involved, I think.
Cheryl is asking, she's saying, I've always struggled to get people to openly share. Most of the time I find people are only interested in promoting themselves and their organisations. How do you get over that? And in a slightly similar vein, Ian Koenig has written, data plus context produces information. Information plus expertise and experience produces knowledge. How do you create the imperative to share?
Yeah, really good point. And actually, I'm never too bothered about people's motivation. Sometimes we found at one of the conferences that we had a sponsor, and the representative for the sponsor felt impelled to tell us all about their organisation and the generosity of their sponsorship. And I felt sorry for them because they knew that it was really tedious for everybody who was there, but they kind of had to go through the motions. And you're right, some people will volunteer to do a presentation or a session for the light group because they've just written a paper, or because they've got a bee in their bonnet about some particular thing, or because they feel they need to represent an organisation or whatever. So generally I'm really honest with them and say, actually nobody's really interested in you or your organisation, but they are interested in what you know. So if you're willing to sort of meet us halfway and share what you know, rather than come and do a promotion, it'll work really well. Some people I find are reluctant to share because they don't think they know anything that nobody else does. They think what they know is of little value, really. And so with those people, I think it's a question of helping them to realize that they can't make that assumption. There's a lot of stuff that they know or that they've experienced that other people would be really glad to know about. In fact, in the knowledge and information world, it's those people I come up against more often who just don't feel that they have anything that's worth saying. And so I think for them, it's really worth putting some effort in, because it's from those people, those thoughtful people, that you learn a great deal. That isn't to say that the big names who've got, you know, a new book or a new theory or 5 ways to aren't worth having as well, but they need to understand that they're there amongst equals. They're not there, you know, to deliver from on high to grateful audience, because it kind of doesn't work that way. I'd be interested to know more about the difficulties other people have with persuading people to share. I suppose sometimes if you feel that your knowledge gives you an edge, or that what you do is what keeps you employed, then you may feel that somebody else should just not intrude on what you know. So I suppose it's horses for courses. It's finding a way to engage that person in sharing more. And it's what I think a lot of knowledge managers, and probably a lot of project managers, have to do every day, is find what it is that will make that person feel comfortable in sharing, or make that person want to share. And I think each person probably has a different trigger.
I think I've got a question from Ian Coning. It's about data plus context produces information, information plus expertise and experience produces knowledge. How do you create the imperative to share? So it's about information management and how knowledge sharing, I think.
So rather than persuading somebody to take part in an event or speak at an event, how do you persuade people generally to share? I guess some of it is about recognizing what is information and what is knowledge. And there are an awful lot of academic books on this subject, which I've found deeply unhelpful, because I don't think you can necessarily prescribe. Back to what we were talking about earlier about the sort of serendipitous insights that you pick up. You don't necessarily, it's like that Rumsfeld thing, you know, you don't know what you don't know, the unknown unknowns. So if you try to prescribe too tightly and turn it into some sort of formula, you may be excluding things which are very valuable, but and you may be excluding the knowledge of people who aren't factored into that equation. So some of it, I think, is about, and maybe that's where I draw on the sort of journalist in me, some of it is about being really, really curious and not prescriptive. So sometimes you just have to put a bit of time in talking to people to find out what maybe they don't even know they know, if that makes sense. And then turning, so yes, I do agree with you that data evolves into information, which evolves into knowledge, which ultimately could turn into wisdom. But I think that's a fairly two-dimensional formula. I think also it's about what's in people's heads and what they think is worth telling you about. Sometimes you simply have to put in a bit of time with a person to find out what useful insights they can offer, which they might not even know they have.
If I may be so bold as to interject, I think
Please do.
it's really brought me back to the sort of application of this within a project setting somewhat, so that I guess we rarely choose in reality who's going to be on our project team, but you know, it's not to make negative assumptions about each other, but it may well be people you don't know very well, and you know, everybody in theory has a sort of given function within the project structure. But I guess a lot of what the Knowledge SIG particularly has been about is sort of peeking between the structures and you know, where you've got that sort of lateral rather than vertical and sort of informal rather than formal ability to communicate, then you will unearth the sorts of things you're talking about. So the serendipity comes into play. But and I think at the same time, what sounds great about an initiative like is that there is, as you said a lot, you know, it's very fluid and there is that serendipity, and you don't know what you don't know until you find it out. But at the same time, there's a rough structure, isn't there? So there are, you know that there's going to be a meeting every month, and you've got some idea of the theme. So it seems to be a good balance between, you know, what's necessarily formal, but what's helpfully, you know, flexible as well.
Yeah, it's actually one thing I've learnt from Like is how useful it has been at breaking down some of the barriers between us in our different professions. So there used to be a meme, I guess it's still around, you know, that knowledge people and IT people are just like chalk and cheese. Don't even put them in a room together because they're going to fight like cats in a sack. And actually, it's a self-fulfilling thing, you know. If you believe that, that will happen. If you just treat other professionals as people, then it might not happen. You might find that you can implement this project with a lot less pain. Likewise, librarians and knowledge managers. Librarians used to give knowledge managers grief sometimes because we weren't certified. And you can get over that by building personal relationships, I think. Thinking about the person first and the job title second, rather than getting hung up. I love Prince 2 diagrammatic representations, but they don't exactly sing and dance. They don't tell you that, you know, that that person who's delivering a package to the project is going to need some help managing their manager or whatever. So I think that those things matter a great deal more than we often give them credit for.
This is a question from Ashish, and it's saying some form of recognition may motivate people to share. What's your view, Virginia, on that, or is simply attending like its own reward? I'm sorry, I don't want to sound too sarcastic asking that. I'm sure it's I'll let you answer.
Well, as far as Like goes, as far as attending Like goes, I think we all have really good antenna, and we all spot somebody who's come for something specific themselves when they walk in the room. So there are some people, because we have a lot of recruitment professionals who come to Like events, there will be people who come to Like events because they need a job and that's all they're focusing on for the whole evening, and all they want to do is talk to the recruitment specialists, and they are very single-minded. They haven't walked into a networking environment thinking, what can I do to help other people? They've come in thinking, what am I going to get out of here? And you kind of know they're not going to come to too many events once they've got themselves a job. That's really their purpose. I don't hold it against them. It's just they're not necessarily getting the value that they could from coming to the event. There are other people who come just because they really want to learn from others who do weird jobs that they don't know anything about. And that's a reward in itself, I think. In the professional environment, I know in knowledge management there's a lot of talk about rewards. So particularly with gamification, it's become a real big thing in knowledge management that you give people badges and stuff like that for completing, I don't know, clicking through certain pages or doing certain things. I think it has some merit, but I don't entirely rely on it. I suspect that you may turn off as many people as you turn on using those sorts of devices. I think that praising people for stuff that they have achieved in a genuine way is probably the most valuable reward of all. I don't know what other people think. Maybe I haven't delved deep enough into gamification, but the last intranet or social software that I implemented was using gamification quite a lot. And some of it felt to me to be kind of formulaic and not too difficult to trick. So I didn't want to introduce anything which could be seen or used in a sort of cynical fashion, because it's kind of the antithesis of knowledge sharing and knowledge exchange.
Okay, thank you for that very thorough answer. I have another question here about a student. You said they're saying it's from Joseph Curtin. He's saying that I noticed on your infographic about who makes up the like members, students appear a few times. Is there a place for current MSc, PhD level students who might not have the level of professional experience of other members, but who can greatly benefit from their knowledge?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we have a lot of students, not just master's students, but library students and various others, and I think that we benefit a lot from what they know as well, because whatever you move into, you bring your whole self to it, don't you? So there's lots of stuff you will have picked up along the way that can contribute really valuably to interactions in a like environment. We don't particularly have a hang-up about whatever anybody's job title is, whatever anybody is doing at the time. We have members who are between jobs, obviously, that's not uncommon, but that doesn't mean that you stop being a professional or that you stop having knowledge when you move from one world to another. So we greatly value students, and if you are one, by all means join. Thank you very much indeed. I'm really grateful that you all took the time to join, and thanks for participating in the polls. It's been a really enjoyable experience, and I hope to catch up with you all at a like event soon.
I think I have one more slide. So that's to tell you again about so there's a quick snapshot on the lower half of the screen there about our Courageous Conversations. So it's YouTube's APM channel, and there's a specific playlist there on those conversations. And finally, you're invited to join the Knowledge SIG too, which you can also do on the APM website. Go to groups, and there's a group then for each SIG, and we are the Knowledge SIG. So do come and say hello and join us there, and you'll receive email updates.